Hey, it's Fox from Inferno Fox Gaming. From the original PS1 version to the PSP and iOS mobile versions, I bounced off of every Final Fantasy Tactics until now. Yes, with the release of the Ivalice Chronicles version of Final Fantasy Tactics, I finally have been able to beat this game. And rather than this be a straight review of that version of the game, let me give you some background information about myself to start. If you've been following this channel, click like, hit subscribe, ring that bell. You know that I am a huge fan of the Final Fantasy series. I've beaten and completed every game in the mainline series, with many of these being like personal favorite video games for me of all time. But I could never get into any of the previous versions of Final Fantasy Tactics simply because they felt either too slow, restrictive, and honestly, the battle system just seemed too convoluted. And it became apparent to me later that as I got into the Fire Emblem series, that these specific judgments that I had of Tic Tacs were way too restrictive. Keep in mind, I tried the PS1 version in the early aughts and the PSP and mobile versions around 2011 or so. Though, funny enough, it was Fire Emblem Awakening in 2013 that I had my own personal awakening to the strategy RPG genre. Seriously, Fire Emblem Awakenings made all of the battles epic and grand in scale, while having a simplified battle system that didn't feel like it took a whole degree to understand. And I played the original Fire Emblem on the Switch that Nintendo translated, Fire Emblem Engage, and the GOAT of the series, Fire Emblem Three Houses. And just like the Ys series better prepared me to handle action RPG games like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I can safely say the Fire Emblem series helped me to do the same with the Ivalice Chronicles. And seriously, this game has a huge pedigree for Final Fantasy fans. I've known many friends like my buddy Astromedes from the Inferno cast, whom said that random battles end up scaling to an epic level once player party members get to high levels like level 99, and he enjoyed single battles lasting for like half an hour to an hour each. Fellow JRPG and Level Up Legacy podcast friend and enthusiast Lou Rock also spoke to me about his love of this entry, being a fan since its OG release. And hell, I've experienced the game back when I played Final Fantasy Record Keeper on my mobile device for an embarrassingly long 6 years. That game in particular was fun because it featured a Final Fantasy Tic Tacs realm where events were portrayed, battles occurred, all in a Final Fantasy VI-like style. With that said, I was able to recruit Ramza, Agrias, and the like for my party in that game that I could take to other Final Fantasy entries within Record Keeper. And it was this especially where I learned just how damn strong the Thunder God Cid Orlando was. But while Record Keeper's battle system was based on an SNES active time battle, the OG Tic Tacs is strategy-based with its overhead view. And now, after 25 years and a lot more Final Fantasy and Fire Emblem games under my belt, what do I think of Tic Tac's battle system? It is excellent. Sure, it's the same thing as what was present since the original, because after all, I feel like this is a pretty faithful adaptation. I think it's the gentle quality of life additions to the Ivalice Chronicles that I truly appreciated. This includes having the fast forward feature, of which I leverage quite a bit in battles, sometimes to my own detriment when it came to the story that played out during battles. Unlike other JRPGs like the Trails series, there's no log that's available to show the previous stated dialogue available in real time. I did appreciate the turn order that was added in Ivalice Chronicles as well. Not only are the numbers in this on the left side of the column, on the left side of the screen, but they're also present physically on the player and enemy units themselves. And it made it very nice to plan out, especially when getting ready to deploy spells and special attacks that impact like a series of tiles, and whether or not their targets had a turn coming and thus capability of moving away from my set attack, which they always do. Another new addition they added was the difficulty levels, which I'm going to admit to you guys, I placed myself on the easiest difficulty they had, Squire, to start the game. My fear was that I'd bounce quickly off of the game if I found it too hard, and I didn't want to have history repeat like it did with the PS1 and PSP versions. But this time, I just got the battle system, you know? After Chapter 1, I ended up moving the difficulty back up to the Knight or normal level, and this difficulty shift was perfectly timed against my favor because the second chapter was when I fought my first Lucavi, Cuchulainn. And this battle, oh my god, it felt like a true boss battle in the Final Fantasy style. It was also hard as hell too, where I did ultimately lose a couple of times. And most of the Lucavi battles ended up being this difficult, although not the final one and last boss of the game. And that's because of how easily the battle system gets broken with the addition of Orlando halfway through the 4th chapter. Seriously, with him being such a powerhouse, it made so many of the battles easier, though not nearly as badly and easy as when the job of calculator or mathematician or arithmetician became truly available and usable. And I took the time to get a bunch of white, black, time, and mystic mage spells, and the game even says in the description of each spell if it's compatible with arithmancy. And then I also had that mage earn 2,600 job points with the arithmetician job itself to unlock all the triggers and numbers, and then I had them switch back to the black mage for the most amount of magic power. And seriously, you don't even really have to understand how the triggers and numbers work. Just unlock all of this, and when selecting arithmancy in battle, the game will show whom is targeted. The spells cast immediately, and it doesn't cost any magic points. I equipped all my party members with chameleon robes to absorb the spell Holy that I made sure my mage learned, then selected the special combination of the triggers and the numbers, then, of course, Holy, and massacred all of the enemies and my entire party at the same time. So again, the enemies got nuked with Holy, and my party got healed for a ton of health. I did also never unlock the job of Mime, so I can't speak to that one's abilities, but I did absolutely love how they broke out the bog standard jobs from the 1st, 3rd, and 5th mainline Final Fantasy games. Having a clear difference between the fighter and mage classes just makes sense, especially with the archer and knight being the basis for the former and the black and white mages for the latter. We got a lot more fun and variety with more deep cut classes like Geomancer and Orator, again with the former being a pretty nice surprise on it landing on the fighter side and actually having some utility because they were able to equip knight-like equipment. And I did love that, hey, bards and dancers, not totally useless. It's a cool twist that not only are that each of these unique to each gender, the dancer on the female side leans towards the fighter side of the bracket, and the bard on the male side towards the mage side of the bracket. And I heard there were, on previous versions of Tic Tacs, equipment and whatnot that was female specific or female only, and of course Ivalice Chronicles does away with all of that. All of the equipment is available regardless of the gender of said character. And speaking of bards, let's talk about the master bard and composer for this game, Hitoshi Sakimoto. To no surprise, I learned he also composed most of the music to Final Fantasy XII, which occurs in the same world of Ivalice, albeit a little earlier in the timeline. Both games have great themes that have their own orchestral, almost solemn and immersive sound to them. I do admit that I prefer the musical stylings of Nobuo Uematsu and what he did for the first 9 entries, but I say that with zero experience listening to the Tic Tac soundtrack beyond my gameplay. Rest assured, I have downloaded the Tic Tac soundtrack and I've added it to my overall playlist, so I'm sure my opinion is going to change on that. And regarding audio, the voice acting is excellent. I am very thankful once again for this remaster to come out, and especially in the current time that we live in right now, where I, as a JRPG player in the West, can enjoy wonderful voice actors voicing dialogue to such a great game's story.
Propel a metal projectile toward its target. This one is of simple make.
Seriously, within the last year, I've played Expedition 33, Metaphor, Trails Through Daybreak 1 and 2, and Sky Remake, and all of these voiced absolutely phenomenally. I know that Fire Emblem Three Houses and Engage had this as well, and that said, I've grown used to this level of excellence. So anything different just feels off, like when I played Grandia 1 for the first time this year. Let's move on to the story because, I got some thoughts on it. And I will let you guys know when I get to spoiler territory, of course. It's not yet. Overall thoughts is that there were some fun and interesting twists and plot turns overall. And a lot of comparisons to Final Fantasy XII that Tic-Tacs really gives life to Ivalice via its narrative and general political overtones. And I also understand why 12 added the bravery and faith abilities as well as the Jaw level magic. I also understand now where all of the Lucavi like Belias originated from. Also, Mustadio's last name being Bonanza was fun since that's Balthier from Final Fantasy XII's last name. But I wonder, from 12, what happened to all the races that were there, like the Banga, the Moogle, Sikh, Vieira. Tic-Tacs mentions a great cataclysm of sorts, resulting in the high civilization of airships and technology from possibly 12 endings. So maybe all of these races just died out or went into some sort of deep level of seclusion. But getting specifically back to Tic-Tacs, the royalty versus common man dialogue does get a little long in the tooth, unfortunately.
You're of lesser birth, and so meant to play lesser roles in life. So that commoner and his sister ought never to have been here at all.
But playing as Ramza, himself constantly being referred to negatively, or my biggest one was him being severely underestimated, got really old. A naive child playing hero, a pawn who knows not the game he plays, a commoner pretending at knighthood. This one refers to his common-born mother, also is possibly a dig at his best buddy Delita. He later, of course, gets branded a heretic, and his wanted poster is placed all over, but not apparently not enough to stop him from shopping in all the towns and castles for supplies, including his own home castle of Igros. It really made me wonder what sort of fight, though, could I, the player, have enjoyed had I fought an enemy that actually did see Ramza for the threat he was, and thus prepare accordingly. And I know maybe it's like a JRPG trope of being underestimated, and I get the age of this game, but I've seen JRPGs, a couple of them, like the Trails series, where they didn't underestimate the main hero, especially like the Cold Steel games with Reen. They're not underestimating him. They're taking him seriously and preparing thusly. But I really feel like that was really lost here. One major issue I had with Tic-Tacs came about a couple events into Chapter 4. I was about 25 hours in, and I was wondering how far into the game that I had left, and I pulled up a walkthrough online, and to my surprise and horror, I found I only had about 5 more events left before I was completely finished and I had beaten the game. And I thought to myself, is this it? Is that all? Sure, the story itself isn't long. This is a product of its time, especially since Final Fantasy VII only takes me about, if I replay it now, about 15 to 20 hours to beat, and that released only months earlier originally on the PS1. And maybe this is where my history with Fire Emblem unfortunately worked against me, since Awakening and Engage netted me roughly 40 to 60 hours, and Three Houses 5 different playthroughs got me 200 plus. But like any classic, Tic-Tac's true strength most likely lies in its replayability, thanks mostly to its battle system. And shoot, I'm already thinking what a second run of this game would look like, especially doing so in the classic mode that Ivalice Chronicles offers. And I have fully finished the game now, roughly about 40 hours to not only complete the last events, but also finish the final, secret dungeon and its super boss. But getting back again to the story elements, I got some more thoughts, but it's going to bring us into spoiler territory. So guys, jump to the time shown on the screen here if you want to avoid spoilers. I've also got this section marked spoilers on the timeline. Getting into it, I loved how the game starts at Oban Monastery and also ends there too. And this is a telltale sign of a Final Fantasy, as games in the series often reference the beginning of the game at the end and vice versa. Think Final Fantasy IV, Cecil and Kain walking down, and the prologue theme playing, that also playing at the end right before you're about to fight Zeromus. Think Final Fantasy V with Ahead on Our Way playing during the title, with Boko riding the Chocobo, and then that theme playing right before the final battle against Exeth. And think Final Fantasy VI with the theme that plays when the title appears, as well as that's the scene that plays at the end when Kefka lowers from the sky. But getting back to Tic Tacs, I also loved that the last boss occurred on an old airship, which of course is a literal hallmark for the series too. But once I beat the game, I realized there were just way too many loose threads to the story. For example, what the heck happened to Ramza and Alma? And especially the Zodiac stones that they were holding. What about what happened to the rest of the party members that were with Ramza, like Orlando, Agrias, Cloud, and the like? Why did Ovelia suddenly stabbed Delita at the end, and why was that a post-credits scene? And the epilogue script mentioned Iran was burnt at the stake. What the hell? You're just going to have that on the script, all happy-go-lucky during like such a colorful full motion video and happy credit music and epilogue music? Like some of this stuff, like this very end, maybe it was like pacing issues. Did they run out of time? Was there more story to tell? I'm not sure what it was. We're not running into like horrible ending territory like what was with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. We're not getting into that because this is just spoilers for Tic Tacs. So that being said, those are just general thoughts on spoilers. Now that we've had this remaster, and I've mentioned my hunger for more Tic Tacs, will Square Enix now make more games in this series? They've already done Final Fantasy Tactics Advance and Tactics A2 Grimoire of the Rift. Unfortunately, both of these take place in a dreamlike version of Ivalice, so they don't really continue the story that we saw on the OG Tic Tacs. And also, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is hot garbage. Now, I'm hoping the Ivalice Chronicles sells well enough to merit more games in the series, since I gotta imagine that Ivalice Chronicles wasn't a lot of money to produce. I think if Square returns to this series with a brand new evergreen title that would continue the history of a non-Dream World Ivalice, I do also hope that they stick with the aesthetic that we see in Tic Tacs. We've had the HD 2D strategy RPG experience with Triangle Strategy, and while that's an excellent game of itself, Tic Tacs has its own unique aesthetic that should not be changed. Now, summing things up here, okay, I mean, if we got to play the review game, I'd give Final Fantasy Tactics the Ivalice Chronicles an 8.5 out of 10. It's got an excellent story, a fun, though easily broken battle system, good music with great voice acting, though the game is surprisingly short. After 25 plus years, I am so very grateful to have been given an opportunity to beat this title. And gentle reminder, guys, this was not a Square Enix sponsored video. I was not given a review code from Square Enix, but I'm wondering, now that you've gotten my thoughts, what are your thoughts about this entry? The OG, War of the Lions, the Ivalice Chronicles. I want to know your thoughts about Tic Tacs. Comments in the section below. Let's start a dialogue. Otherwise, thank you again for watching. I appreciate y'all, and have a great day.